yet that the Holy Spirit was a gentleman. He can be if he wants to, but he's not a gentleman. He's a fire, he's a storm, he's a wind, he's a whole lot of things, but to just hold him in your boxes of religious rhetoric and create gentlemanness around him, he's not, he was wild goose. He was unstable in his eternal purposes. He has eternal purposes that are stabilizing forces for those that are wild enough to go after him. Unstable ones that lean forward is what he was looking for. There's a lot of folks that leaned forward and changed the world. You know, Stephen Jeffries is one. He leaned forward. Christmas Evans leaned forward. Lorenzo Dow and Evan Roberts and Amy Semple McPherson and Sam Jones and George Whitfield. You know, none of these people fit in their present day because they leaned forward. Imagine what it would have been like when George Whitfield walked into the platform that day in full clerical attire, and he looked out the window and he said, "Look yonder." Wouldn't you notice it? He looked out the window and he said, "There's more of them out there than there are in here." What in the world was that? And he walked down out of the pulpit and out onto the porch and began to preach the gospel to all of the ones that were out there instead of in here. And his church, they wanted to hang him. They wanted to tar and feather him and run him out of town. Why, he stains the dignity of the pulpit by wearing the clerical robe out of the We'll send him to Oxford. They'll deal with his enthusiasm. That's what they said. Let's get rid of this clown. He's gone stupid on us. That's what they were saying. He stepped right outside of the restrictions and boundaries that they had created around religious rhetoric and lofty liturgy. But here he was standing out there now with the passion of his heart being unveiled. Pretty soon he no longer has a place in the box. Why? Because he leaned forward. And a few days later, you find him standing down there on a big rock while all the coal miners are coming in and all the coal miners are going out. And the shift is changing, and thousands of them are shifting, and he's standing up on this rock scared, just trembling in fear, knowing what could happen when he began to preach. But he raised his voice and began to declare the word of the Lord over them, and all of them just stood still while this young man named George Whitfield preached the gospel out of fear and trembling. And in a few minutes, all of a sudden he saw these white streaks going down the face of these rugged miners, and he knew that God had done something. And it moved him into his new day. Why? Because he leaned forward. Wow. Not long after that, you'll find him standing in Cambuslang in Scotland in a place called the Preacher's Brae, standing there preaching to 50,000 people. While he's standing there preaching to 50,000 people, the wind of God's Spirit blows across a place to where it looks like wind blowing across a wheat field as they're mowed down under the power of his words. And this was not some old institution that had already become a part of a long shadow. This was a young man in his 20s standing there preaching out of the power of the Spirit. And this was not pulpit prowess. This was supernatural releases of God's Word. And not too awful bad for a young cross-eyed, tongue-tied boy that didn't have any hope or any promise of ever being a great pulpiteer. But he stood there that day and got a whole new understanding of who he was. And from that day forward, it was hard to contain him in a boat. It was hard because he found the wind that was put in his sail to carry the gospel to his generation. And what did they do? Back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Across the water he went. Actually, if you look at how many trips he made, he spent 6 years on a boat. 6 years of his life in the quietness of the sea, listening for the purposes of God and waiting until his feet touched the places where he could release everything that was in him. And he leaned forward. See, they're the ones who went through the hell so that settlers could prosper. They're the ones that a lot of times went through the fire so the next ones could experience favor. They are the boats that sailed and conquered the lands to be settled. They were the ones. Well, okay, it's about time to go. So let me just. All right, let me. Can I read you something? I'm using notes tonight. Y'all probably picked up on that, didn't you? I'll tell you, I was in a car wreck about 6 months ago.